Sheffield, England, 1991. Couple Eddie and Christine Needham withdrew their life savings, packed up their belongings and moved, along with their sons Stephen and Danny, to the sunny Greek island of Kos. Eddie and Christine had holidayed in Kos years earlier and had fallen in love with the island's natural beauty and the friendly, laid-back character of its people. What the pair desired most was to live a simpler, more fulfilling life. Before moving to Kos, Eddie and Christine had been out of work and had become dissatisfied with their lives in England.
Chris just fell in love with the island.
There's everything, isn't there?
Yeah.
Figs, olives.
Oranges and lemon trees and...
I didn't want to live anywhere else.
In fact, she cried and cried and cried when we had to come away. She just didn't want to leave.
Upon arriving in Greece, the Needhams moved into a caravan on a secluded piece of land in the small village of Heracles outside of Kos town. Eddie and his 17-year-old son Stephen found work renovating a nearby farmhouse for a local resident. Danny, aged 11, would begin to attend a Greek school. Though the family had a limited grasp of the language, they were committed to learning and to becoming members of their local community. Months after arriving on Kos, the Needhams were joined by the eldest of their 3 children, their daughter, Kerry. Kerry, 19, had initially opted to stay behind in Sheffield with her at the time 18-month-old son, Ben, and his father, Simon, 21. Like Eddie and Christine, Kerry and Simon were unemployed and struggling with life in England. After a month of her parents telling her how much better life on the island was compared to the UK, the pair took the plunge and moved to Kos along with their son, Ben. Kerry and Simon moved into an apartment and Kerry would soon find work at a local hotel. Unfortunately for Simon, he was not only unable to find work, but was also struggling to adapt to life away from Sheffield. Simon would reluctantly move back to England months later. The Needhams were just beginning to settle into their new lives when, on July 24th, 1991, 21-month-old Ben vanished. For Kerry Needham, her young son was the centre of her universe. Blue-eyed, blonde-haired Ben brought joy to his family with his playful and adventurous personality. After Ben's father Simon had left to return to England, Kerry's mum, Christine, had begun taking care of Ben whilst Kerry was at work. It was at 8 a.m. on Wednesday 24th of July 1991 that Kerry would drop Ben off at his grandmother's caravan for the final time. Kerry said goodbye to her mum and son and left for a double shift at the Palm Beach Hotel. Christine, Ben and Ben's young uncle Danny had breakfast and spent the morning playing. In the afternoon, the trio made the short walk up the road to the nearby farmhouse where Eddie and Stephen were working. Ben was in his pushchair, clutching 2 small toy cars. After greeting his grandfather at the farmhouse, Ben played in the garden at the front of the property. After getting wet while playing with a water hose, Christine removed Ben's shorts and hung them up to dry on the branch of a tree in the garden. The owner of the farmhouse prepared a traditional Greek lunch and the Needhams sat down in the early afternoon to eat. Shortly after lunch, Stephen Needham left the farmhouse through the kitchen diner, walking past his nephew in the front garden. He mounted his moped and drove away. This is the last time Ben Needham is believed to have been seen by anyone. A few moments later, Christine and Eddie realised they had not heard their boisterous grandson make a sound in several minutes. Christine got up from the dining table and walked out into the front garden to check on him. Ben wasn't in the garden. Not immediately panicked, Christine walked halfway down the long path that led uphill to the farmhouse. There was no sign of Ben on the path or in the brush that lined either side of it. Christine was certain that her grandson could not have made it all the way down the path in the time since she had last heard him playing. So she headed back to the farmhouse and told Eddie that Ben was gone. The pair checked the area in the immediate vicinity of the farmhouse, but found no sign of Ben. Ben's shorts and 2 toy cars were also nowhere to be found. Remembering that their son Stephen had left just minutes before Ben had gone silent, the couple assumed that he had taken his nephew for a ride on his moped. Though they found it peculiar that Stephen would take Ben without telling them, they settled on him having taken Ben as the most likely explanation for him being gone. Assuming that Stephen would return Ben in time, and with no way of calling Stephen to confirm it was actually him who had taken Ben, Eddie returned to work. It was hours later, after finding Stephen showering at Kerry's home and discovering that he hadn't taken Ben, that Eddie and Christine made the gut-wrenching realization that their grandson was gone. Kerry was standing outside of the Palm Beach Hotel. It was evening by now, and her day's shift would soon be coming to an end. She was startled by the sight of her mother, Christine, walking frantically towards the hotel. Christine broke the news to Kerry that Ben had disappeared and hadn't been seen in hours. The police had been called, and back at the village, the search for Ben had begun. Kerry, horrified by the news, informed her employer and hurried back home to help in the search.
I went out and my mum was there. She was in tears, telling me that she'd lost Ben. Ben had gone missing. And the police wanted me to go up to the hillside where he'd gone missing from. My instant reaction was, well, disbelief, really. I mean, how can he have gone missing? He can't have gone far. He's a baby.
Initial efforts to find Ben were hampered by the darkness and the rough terrain. After realising there was a chance his grandson had been abducted, Eddie Needham rushed to the nearest port where he was told he would be met by the police and began frantically looking in every car that passed by. It was 3 a.m. 3 ferries had already left the island of Kos since Ben was last seen, and the police failed to show up at the port. Feeling powerless, Eddie was forced to return home. Whilst the search for Ben continued, police turned their attention to the Needhams. Police intensively questioned Stephen Needham. They believed that it was a possibility that the 17-year-old had taken his nephew on a moped ride, an accident had occurred, and that he had buried Ben's body in a panic. Police pointed to minor damage to Stephen's moped as evidence that an accident had occurred. Stephen forcefully denied having taken Ben, and it was proven that damage to the moped had occurred prior to Ben's vanishing. An elderly neighbour who had been sitting on a balcony overlooking the pathway to the farmhouse reported seeing Stephen leave the property alone on his moped. The police also found nothing to link Eddie or Christine to Ben's disappearance. It would take days for police to alert airports and docks. After 11 days of searching, the island's chief of police said, "We now believe we have searched every possible part of that area and the boy is not there. It leaves us with a great mystery. We have no theories, we have no solutions." To all intents and purposes, the official search for Ben was over, and not a single trace of him had been found. The Needhams were forced to move back to England in September of 1991 due to an illness in the family. It was a painful experience for the entire family to have to leave Kos without Ben. The Needhams, however, did not give up the search, and Kerry firmly believed that her son had been abducted. A rumour began to emerge on Kos that Ben had been abducted by Romani people. Exactly where this rumour emerged from is unknown, though some sources claim that a man working in Iraklis had seen Ben being taken by a woman that he described as Romani. It's worth noting that the Romani community in Greece and across the world have faced racism and persecution for centuries. The Romani people have traditionally been nomadic, though many have chosen to settle over the years, and particularly in recent times. A stereotype existed that Romani people not only sold their own children, but that it was a cultural norm for them to abduct and either adopt or sell the children of others. The rumour about Ben having been kidnapped by Roma led to dozens of reports of little white blonde-haired boys being sighted with Romani families or within Romani camps. The Needhams themselves investigated several of these reported sightings over the years, travelling across Europe, speaking with Romani people directly, and ruling out children who it would later be found actually were of Romani descent. The Roma are believed to originate in India and typically have darker skin and hair. This doesn't mean, however, that it's impossible for Romani people to have fairer hair and skin, and many do. In total, there were over 300 reported sightings of a boy matching Ben's description across Greece between 1991 and 1993. Back home in the UK, Ben's case became one of the most high-profile missing children's cases the country had ever seen. In 1992, the first e-fit of Ben was produced, and this image was posted at ports and airports across Greece. I couldn't find this first e-fit image online. After a request from UK Prime Minister John Major, Greece's land force, the Hellenic Army, carried out a renewed search of the island in 1993. This search would prove fruitless. The next development in the case came in December 1995. A private investigator found a boy who fit Ben's description living with a Romani family in a camp located in Salonika, Greece. The PI claims to have spoken with the boy, who told him that his mother had given him to a Romani family. The man also captured video of the boy, which was shared with the Needhams. Local police took the boy from the family, and it was later determined that he was not Ben Needham. The boy's birth certificate was authentic, and it was found that his father was in prison and had left him with the Romani family. It was around this time that an anonymous businessman offered a reward of £530,000 for Ben's safe return. In 1998, a British holidaymaker encountered a boy who stood out as the only fair-skinned and fair-haired child amongst a small group of Greek children. The other children referred to the boy as the blonde one. Suspicious, the man ruffled the boy's hair as pretext to obtain a sample for DNA analysis. The man also captured video of the child. DNA testing would later prove that the boy was not Ben, and the child's family would also provide photos of their son as a baby. In 2003, a PI working for the family visited Kos with Danny Needham. The PI investigated a photo sent to him by a holidaymaker who visited Turkey in 1999. The picture showed a group of Turkish children, among them a blonde boy who resembled an age-progressed photo of Ben. This lead, like the others, led nowhere. In the 2000s, a young man came forward believing that he could be Ben, as there were no photos of him under the age of 2. This man later turned out to not be Ben. In 2009, the Needhams reached out to Member of European Parliament Edward Macmillan Scott. Edward had campaigned on behalf of the parents of missing British girl Madeleine McCann. Edward Macmillan Scott championed Ben's case and accused police of not following up on leads, including the alleged sighting of a strange white car in Iroquois on the day of Ben's vanishing. To this day, the significance, if any, of this white car is unknown. In 2010, on what would have been Ben's 21st birthday, Kerry Needham made a fresh appeal for information in her son's case. At this time, a £100,000 reward was available. The largest police operation since the initial search for Ben in 1991 took place in October of 2012. Following an unspecified tip, police came to consider the prospect that Ben had been accidentally buried by an excavator driver dumping building rubble nearby. UK police, assisted by the Greeks, carried out a search of a large mound of rubble and earth that had since grassed over. The search utilised geophysical survey equipment, forensic archaeologists and human remains detection dogs. Police also obtained a sample of Ben's DNA from Sheffield Children's Hospital, just in case they did need to match against any evidence found in their search. Eddie Needham joined the search and helped to point out to police how the land had changed over the years, and where places of interest were located. Kerry Needham maintained that the mound of earth was there when Ben went missing. This search would turn up nothing. In 2016, police received a tip that a man from Kos, Konstantinos Barkas, a digger operator known as Dino, had accidentally killed Ben whilst digging land to the rear of the farmhouse, before burying his body amongst building waste. The theory was that Ben had wandered out into the field that Dino was known to be digging and had been crushed to death. Dino had died of cancer a year before the tip was reported. Operation Ben was launched and 21 days of excavation and searches ensued. Excavations focused on the area surrounding a tree that had been planted after Ben's disappearance. More than 800 tons of soil had been dug up, and over 90 items of interest were gathered and taken back to the UK for forensic analysis. Over 100 bones were also found, but all were later found to be animal bones. Most of the 90 collected items were found to be of no relevance to the case. However, amongst these was a toy car believed to have belonged to Ben and a small leather strap believed to have come from one of his sandals. Confirming the find, though not specifying exactly what had been found, Detective Inspector Cousins stated, "My team and I know that machinery, including a large digger, was used to clear an area of land on the 24th of July 1991 behind the farmhouse that was being renovated by the Needhams. It is my professional belief that that Ben Needham died as a result of an accident near to the farmhouse in Heracles where he was last seen playing. The recovery of this item and its location further adds to my belief that material was removed from the farmhouse on or shortly after the day that Ben disappeared. Detectives believed that there was a conspiracy of silence amongst Dino's friends and family, a claim that the man's family strenuously deny. In 2017, following months of forensic analysis, traces of blood were found on the fragment of sandal as well as in the soil found inside the toy car. A year later, it was revealed that the blood did not belong to Ben. July 24, 2021 marked the 30-year anniversary of Ben's disappearance. It was just a few days before that, and only weeks before the publishing of this video, that a new lead emerged in the case. An unnamed witness contacted the Help Find Ben Needham Facebook page, claiming to have seen a woman find a small child who had been abandoned on a beach in Corfu, Greece, almost 600 miles away from Kos Island, decades earlier. The witness alleged that the woman found a blonde infant, dirty and desperately crying, wearing only a nappy and a white t-shirt. The child is also claimed to have spoken English. The witness claimed that he was not alone that day and was able to offer a second witness, his friend, who corroborated his claims. The witnesses were teenagers at the time and recalled seeing the woman take the boy to a nearby bar and buy him a cola. The boys say they remember this detail as they weren't allowed to drink cola themselves at the time. The woman was alleged to be in her early 20s at the time, and it was claimed she worked at a nearby camp. These claims were corroborated by the emergence of a third witness who worked as a receptionist at the camp at that time. The third witness claims to have seen the woman bring a distraught, snotty child back to the camp. The woman allegedly claimed to have picked up the child after he'd been abandoned on the beach by a Roma family. Kerry was told by the third witness that the woman did not return to work after that day, and that she had also encountered the woman years later and been told that she had chosen to keep the child for herself. The receptionist was later shown a picture of Ben and stated she believed that he was the child she saw the woman carrying that day. A fourth witness, and perhaps the most intriguing, is the owner of the camp. He backed up the claim that the woman not only worked at the camp, but had also found a child who'd been dumped on the beach. Unfortunately, the owner of the camp died 2 days after speaking with Kerry Needham. The final claim made by one of the witnesses is that the boy, now a grown man, actually still lives in the area and speaks Greek. Kerry was able to contact the woman, who was named as Maria, via social media. She was left confused, however, when Maria said she, quote, couldn't remember whether or not she had found a child. Maria recently gave an exclusive interview with the Daily Mirror where she denied the allegations and claimed that she had never found a child and that she only had one child, a daughter. At the request of British authorities, Greek police are investigating this lead. Since the emergence of the lead, 5 Britons have come forward claiming to have seen Ben on Corfu in the years after his disappearance. Amongst these is a woman who works for a major crimes unit in the UK police force. She claims to have seen Ben 25 minutes from the campsite where Maria worked in 1992. The woman claims to have reported her potential sighting to police years earlier, but had decided to come forward again after hearing the latest development in the case. Nothing further is known about Maria or the witnesses at this time, and police inquiries are ongoing. Theories in Ben's case fall broadly into 2 categories. The first, abduction, and the second, some kind of accident. Kerry Needham has always maintained her belief that her son was abducted and is still alive somewhere in the world. Advocates of the abduction theory point to the lack of a body as well as the lack of any evidence that Ben came to harm as proof that Ben must have been taken by an opportunistic stranger. Let's address the evidence for a potential abduction. First, the strange white car sighted in Heracles on the day of Ben's disappearance. Sources on this lead are conflicting, with some claiming that the owner of the car has never been identified and the lead never even investigated, while others claim that one of the 3 alleged occupants of the vehicle is known locally and actually still lives on the island. There's nothing other than the car's presence on the day of Ben's vanishing to link it or its unknown occupants to Ben's vanishing. No one was sighted carrying a child into the vehicle or even exiting the vehicle at all. The car was not sighted driving up the long, hilly, one-way path to the farmhouse. Stephen Needham didn't report seeing the white car as he drove away on his moped. And Eddie and Christine Needham didn't report hearing a car near the farmhouse before their grandson went quiet. Some speculate that Ben may have gotten so far down the path leading away from the farmhouse that he and his potential abductors were out of sight and earshot of his grandparents and the neighbour whose balcony overlooked a portion of the path, leaving no witnesses to the potential abduction. Many of the same points are made about the possibility of an abduction by a stranger who wasn't sighted on the day. How likely is it that a predator was stalking this secluded, rural Greek village and just so happened to stumble across an unaccompanied child? Another thing that would need to be accounted for in this theory is the disappearance of Ben's shorts, which were hanging far out of his reach in a tree, and his 2 small matchbox cars, none of which has ever been found. The toy car found during the 2016 dig is believed to be Ben's, though this has never been proven conclusively. If Ben was taken, as is rumoured locally, by a Romany woman or any other stranger for that matter, they would have to have walked or drove up the path leading to the farmhouse without being spotted by the neighbour on the balcony, entered the front garden, taken Ben, his shorts and his toys, all the while just feet away from the Needhams who were in the kitchen diner. Not impossible, but it certainly seems difficult. That person would then have to have walked back down the path, presumably to a vehicle without detection, and then drove away. Of course, if the person did get this far without detection, leaving the island of Kos would have been simple, as the ports were not alerted to a potential abduction until days later. Some speculate that the Needhams may have been being watched by a predator or a trafficker. Though this can't be ruled out, there's no evidence to support this theory. The theory that the woman known as Maria may have had involvement in Ben's case is intriguing for a number of reasons. First, it means that a person or people would had to have taken Ben from Iraklis, kept him for a period of time, even travelling 600 miles to Corfu with him, before then cruelly abandoning him on a beach. It also means that a young woman would have to have found Ben and taken him in without ever reporting her discovery to police, but also risking revealing her find to her boss and a colleague. Ben would then have to have gone unnoticed as the random child that suddenly appeared in the woman's life at 2 years old without rousing any suspicion. Ben would also presumably have to have been registered at schools, a local doctor's office, a hospital. And what happens when he grows up and chooses to get married or asks why there are no pictures of him? Perhaps the woman did find Ben, but handed him on to another person or a couple. The whole theory is incredibly far-fetched, but we have to ask why 4 separate witnesses would all claim to have seen the same thing. What would these witnesses have to gain by their lie? Presumably the 2 witnesses alleged to have seen Maria find a baby don't know the woman who worked as receptionist at the now closed down camp, or do they know each other? And what reason would they have to make up such an awful story? Why would the owner of the camp feel the need to lie about Maria finding a child? What did he have to gain by this lie? We have 2 options when it comes to the woman known as Maria. First, either Maria did find a baby and it either was or wasn't Ben, and she either raised that baby as her own or gave him away. Or second, that Maria is the subject of a terrible lie being perpetrated for unknown reasons. If Ben was abducted, then he's either alive and completely unaware of who he is after being raised by his abductor or a family he was passed on to, or he was taken and harmed in some other way thereafter. There is a third possibility, of course, and that is that Ben was raised by a family but died young from events completely unrelated to his abduction. The second theory in the case, and the one favoured by police, is that Ben was the victim of an unfortunate accident. Exactly how this accident unfolded is open to speculation. Greek police initially suspected that Ben's uncle Stephen may have taken him on a ride on his moped, had an accident, panicked, and then hid or buried Ben's body. Ben's father Simon was known to take Ben on short rides. Conflictingly, in a 2001 documentary, Eddie Needham claimed that his son Stephen and Ben's father had both taken Ben on rides in the past. In the same documentary, however, Stephen claims to have never taken his nephew on a ride before. If Stephen hadn't taken Ben for a ride before, why would the Needhams have assumed that he'd have taken him for a ride on the day of his vanishing, and without telling them? Evidence against the moped accident theory include the fact that the neighbour on the balcony reported seeing Stephen leave the farmhouse alone, and that no witnesses came forward claiming to have seen Stephen with Ben or having seen an accident. The minor damage to Stephen's moped was also proven to have occurred before Ben's vanishing. There is also the reasonable question of why Stephen wouldn't have simply taken his nephew to a hospital or returned him to the farmhouse to seek help. It's also fair to ask how a 17-year-old would have lived with the weight of such a secret. Stephen has always cooperated with police and even voluntarily underwent hypnotherapy. Though this line of inquiry had to be pursued to ensure a thorough investigation, it's undoubtable that the scrutiny and the burden of being the last person to see Ben alive took its toll on Stephen. In the aforementioned documentary, Stephen claims that he blamed himself for years, stating, "I wish I'd just picked him up from the garden and sat him on his granddad's knee. He'd probably still be here." The moped accident theory has been all but ruled out, as has Stephen's involvement in the case. The official police theory remains that Ben wandered into a field that was being worked on and was accidentally crushed by a digger. The digger operator then either knowingly or unknowingly buried Ben's body, or Ben's body was intentionally or unintentionally removed from the site. The 2016 witness claims that Dino, the man working the field, accidentally killed Ben and then hid his body in the rubble and earth. Dino's family strongly deny this allegation, and the 2016 dig produced only the toy car and a piece of leather believed to belong to one of Ben's sandals. Analysis of blood found on these items showed that the DNA sample didn't belong to Ben. How these samples were still viable after 25 years in the earth is testament to how far DNA forensics has come. If these items did belong to Ben, then how did they get there and whose blood is on them? And if they don't belong to Ben, then who do they belong to? The 2012 and 2016 digs produced nothing to conclusively confirm that Ben had died in a crushing accident. Though this doesn't mean that if Ben was accidentally crushed, that his body wasn't intentionally or unintentionally buried or disposed of elsewhere. Perhaps some of the rubble and earth was taken to a separate site or to landfill. Linked to the accident theory is the suggestion that Ben may have simply wandered off and died of exposure, where his remains were then scattered by scavengers and covered by overgrowth. This raises the question of how far 21-month-old Ben could have wandered on his infant legs and surrounded by rough terrain. Could he have fallen down a hole? Were there old wells in the area that he may have become trapped in? There was a thorough 11-day police and land force search of Iroquois that turned up no sign of Ben at all. The accident theory also still wouldn't account for the fact that Ben's shorts were never found. Even if we allow for the possibility that the shorts were blown out of the tree, how far could they have gone? If Ben is still in Iroquois or somewhere else on the island of Kos, then he or his remains have evaded discovery for 30 years. The Needhams have never given up the search for Ben. His case has featured in TV documentaries and been the subject of articles and books for decades. In the early years of Ben's vanishing, Kerry Needham struggled to come to terms with the loss of her son. She experienced a breakdown and attempted suicide multiple times. New purpose was injected into Kerry's life following the birth of a daughter who she named Leanna. Leanna never met her older brother, but has become just as dedicated to finding him as her mother. Through the hundreds of sightings, the false leads, the police operations, the travelling, Kerry Needham has continued to champion Ben's cause, fighting for extra funding and working to keep his name in the spotlight. Kerry remains adamant that Ben is still alive and will continue to believe so until it is conclusively proven otherwise. Speaking to the Daily Mirror on the 30th anniversary of Ben's disappearance, a now 49-year-old Kerry said, "After 30 years, I'm still stuck in 1991 and I can't move forward from that day. I've devoted 30 years to finding Ben. I've never had any dreams or goals apart from finding Ben. I've never had a career or owned my own home. I've never been able to do any of that." 21-month-old Ben Needham vanished from the village of Iroquois on the island of Kos, Greece, on July 24, 1991. Ben was last seen playing in the garden of a farmhouse his granddad was renovating at around 2:30 p.m, wearing nothing but a t-shirt, white socks and a nappy. He is described as white, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and has a small red birthmark on the back of his neck. The age-progressed photos on screen show what Ben may have looked like at various stages of his life. If you think you have any information that might help in this case, perhaps you have a memory from a trip to Greece or a nearby country in the last 30 years, please consider speaking to local authorities where you live.